My life had always been defined by discipline and duty. From a young age, I was taught that protecting my people was a sacred mission, something greater than myself. Serving in the military was a calling, a purpose I embraced without question. Each morning as I put on my uniform, I felt like more than just a soldier. I felt like a guardian, a protector. War shaped my understanding of the world. The lines between right and wrong were clear, or so I believed. Orders were given and I followed them. That was my reality. There was no space for doubt, no room for hesitation. Faith was my pillar, my anchor in the chaos. I believed that if my time came, if I were to die in battle, I would do so fulfilling a mission that was righteous and just. But life has a way of shattering our strongest beliefs. On September 24, 2024, everything I thought I knew was ripped apart in an instant. The day started like any other, clear orders, no questions. My unit had been instructed to secure a perimeter in a conflict zone. Intelligence reports suggested that a group of civilians might be aiding the enemy. Among them were women and children. I was trained not to question. Orders were orders. I raised my rifle, steadying my breath, my finger hovering over the trigger. The weight of responsibility was familiar, but something was different this time. A strange unease crept into my chest, a sensation I couldn't explain. My pulse quickened unnaturally, my body felt heavier. Then, everything changed. Before I could pull the trigger, a sharp, searing pain exploded in my shoulder. A bullet. The impact threw me backward, my vision blurring as I crashed onto the ground. A wave of heat surged through my body and then, darkness. Everything around me faded. The screams, the gunfire, it all became distant, like echoes from a world I no longer belonged to. And then, something impossible happened. I felt myself rising. It was as if my body had been left behind, and I was now floating above the battlefield, looking down at the scene below. I could see my fellow soldiers rushing toward me, hear the frantic calls for a medic. But their voices were muffled, distant, like memories slipping away. Then a force pulled me away, a tunnel of darkness, But it wasn't frightening. It was quiet, peaceful. A strange calm settled over me as I drifted forward, deeper into the unknown. I didn't know where I was going, but something, or someone, was waiting for me at the end of this path. With every step, I felt further removed from my old life. The war, the pain, the orders, all of it faded. It was as if I had escaped the turmoil of existence itself. I thought I had found peace. I was wrong. This was only the beginning. Before we continue, I have something special for you. If you're watching this and want to be mentioned in our next video, comment your name and city below. We want to give you a personal shout out and share this journey with you. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this incredible story. I emerged from the darkness into a place unlike anything I had ever seen. At first, it felt like I had stepped into a realm of pure peace. Before me stretched a magnificent city, its streets paved with what seemed like polished gold, its buildings glowing with a soft, ethereal light. The air carried a fragrance that reminded me of childhood memories, of moments when life felt simple and safe. People walked past me, their faces radiant with joy. They smiled, greeted one another with warmth, and spoke in soft voices. I watched as they embraced, as they laughed, as if they had found eternal happiness. A deep sense of relief filled me. I had died, that much I knew, but if this was death, then there was nothing to fear. This must be heaven, I thought. The weight of my past, the violence, the choices I had made, they no longer mattered. Here I was free. I walked further into the city, captivated by its beauty. Everything felt lighter. The burden I had carried as a soldier, the split-second decisions between life and death, the guilt that had lingered in the corners of my mind, all of it seemed to dissolve. But then something changed. At first it was subtle. The golden glow of the city dimmed ever so slightly. The once fragrant air grew stale, touched by an unfamiliar chill. The sounds of laughter and conversation softened, replaced by murmurs, whispers I couldn't understand. I looked around. The smiles that had greeted me moments ago were gone. Faces became distant, hollow. The warmth in their eyes faded, replaced by something cold, something unreadable. The city itself seemed to shift. Buildings that had once stood tall and perfect now bore cracks. Streets narrowed into pathways that twisted in impossible ways, like a maze with no clear direction. I turned back the way I had come, but the road had vanished. I was no longer walking through paradise. I was trapped. I kept moving forward, but with each step, the illusion unraveled further. The golden buildings darkened, their once smooth walls turning to rough stone. The roads beneath my feet cracked open, revealing gaps that seemed endless. The air, once sweet, carried the faint scent of decay. A pit formed in my stomach as I realized that whatever this place was, it was not what it had seemed. Then the whispers grew louder. I turned a corner and the ground beneath me trembled. A wall that had once shone with heavenly light now stood crumbling before me. Beyond it, a great abyss yawned, stretching farther than my eyes could see. I took a step closer, peering into the darkness below. A terrible force pulled at me, like invisible hands grasping at my soul. And then I fell. The city above disappeared as I plummeted into the abyss, swallowed by the darkness. The air around me burned and a terrible, suffocating heat pressed against my skin. My fall ended abruptly, and when I looked around, I saw flames stretching endlessly in every direction. The air was thick, heavy with a scent that made my stomach turn. Screams filled the space around me. Everywhere I looked, people were writhing in agony. Some were engulfed in flames that never consumed them, their bodies burning endlessly. Others were chained, forced to carry unbearable weights that pressed them into the scorched ground. Some wandered aimlessly, their eyes empty, their expressions twisted with sorrow and regret. I tried to move, but my body felt impossibly heavy. My breath came in ragged gasps. The heat, the suffering, the cries of despair, it was all-consuming. I had never known fear like this before. Then, through the shifting flames, I saw him. A man hunched over, struggling beneath the crushing weight of a massive stone. His uniform was torn, his face contorted in agony. I knew that face. Amir. He had been a fellow soldier, a friend. We had fought side by side, shared meals, traded stories of home. I had not seen him in years, but here he was, trapped in this nightmare. Amir. I called out. He didn't respond. He kept moving forward, step by agonizing step, his body trembling under the unbearable weight. Then he looked up. His eyes met mine, but there was no recognition in them. No relief, no hope, only emptiness. He was lost, consumed by the torment of this place. I wanted to reach him, to pull him out, but an invisible force held me in place. And then I saw others. More faces, some familiar, some unknown, all suffering. Among them was a man I recognized from television, a political figure I had once admired. But his face was barely recognizable now, burned and twisted in agony. He was surrounded by others, their hands raised, casting stones at him without pause. Our eyes met, and in that moment I understood. This was no dream. This was no illusion. I was in hell, and I had no way out. The realization that I was in hell sent a cold wave of terror through me. This was not just a place of fire and torment, it was something far worse. It was a place where the weight of one's own sins became inescapable. There was no moment of rest, no reprieve from the agony. Each soul was consumed by the pain of their past, trapped in an endless cycle of suffering. The screams around me grew louder, more desperate, but the most horrifying part was the way people seemed to accept their fate. There was no resistance, no struggle, only resignation. They carried their burdens, endured their punishments, and bore the scars of their choices without protest. I turned my gaze back to Amir. His face was a reflection of despair, his back bending under the crushing weight of the stone he carried. His steps were slow, tortured, but he never stopped moving. Others walked beside him, each carrying their own burden, their own punishment. Then a voice echoed through the flames. "Why did you kill me?" I froze. The voice was small, fragile, yet it cut through me like a blade. I turned, and there, standing just a few feet away, was a child. He looked no older than 8 or 9, his eyes filled with sorrow. But I knew that face. I had seen him before. Memories surfaced, sharp and unrelenting. A mission. A village. The chaos of war. Orders had been given. The moment played in my mind as if it were happening all over again. The sound of my rifle firing, the child collapsing into his mother's arms, her scream piercing the air. I had told myself at the time that it was necessary. That in war, collateral damage was unavoidable. That I was following orders. But standing before him now, none of those justifications mattered. He took a step closer. "Why did you kill me?" he asked again. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could I say? That I was sorry? That I had no choice? That I hadn't meant to? None of it would change the truth. Tears burned my eyes. I wanted to look away, to turn and run, but I was paralyzed. The weight of my guilt was heavier than any chain, heavier than the flames around me. Then more figures emerged from the darkness. One by one they stepped forward. A man with empty eyes. A woman clutching her chest, blood staining her hands. A boy with a shattered expression, his body riddled with wounds. I recognized them all. They were the faces of those I had killed. Each one stood silently, their eyes locked onto mine. They did not scream or accuse me with words. They did not need to. Their presence alone was enough. The truth was undeniable. I had condemned them. And now I was condemned alongside them. The weight of my sins pressed down on me, suffocating, unbearable. I fell to my knees, gasping for air. The flames around me seemed to grow higher, as if feeding on my torment. I did not belong to the living. I did not belong to the dead. I belonged to this place. And this place had no mercy. The flames roared around me, twisting and writhing like living things, consuming everything in their path but never offering release. The weight of my sins was no longer just a feeling, it was a force pressing down on me, crushing me under its unbearable burden. My knees sank into the scorched ground, my breath shallow, my mind reeling. I wanted to scream, to cry out, but my voice was lost in the wails of the damned. I could still see them, those I had wronged, their silent eyes locked onto mine. They did not move, did not reach for me, did not speak. Yet their presence alone was enough to unravel me. I thought I had known fear. I had been in battle. I had faced death. I had watched comrades fall and had felt bullets pass so close that they left my ears ringing. But this was terror beyond anything I had ever known. This was final. There was no escape, no second chance, no moment of redemption. And then the ground trembled beneath me. A deep, guttural sound echoed from the abyss, something ancient and horrifying, something that made even the tormented souls around me fall silent. The air grew thick, suffocating, pressing against my chest as if unseen hands were reaching inside me, gripping my soul with claws of ice. From the darkness, figures began to emerge. They were not human. Their forms were twisted, grotesque. Shadows wrapped around them like living armor, shifting and pulsing with every step they took. Some had elongated limbs, their fingers ending in razor-sharp claws. Others had faces that contorted and changed, flickering between expressions of rage, sorrow, and something far worse, mockery. They were waiting for me. The realization hit me like a blow. My suffering had only just begun. One of the creatures stepped forward, its voice slithering through the air like a whisper made of venom. "You thought war was suffering?" It laughed, the sound curdling my insides. "You have not yet begun to suffer." The others joined in its laughter, a chorus of broken, hollow sounds that made the very ground quake. I tried to move, but my body was frozen. "Do you know why you are here?" the creature asked, tilting its head in mock curiosity. I forced my mouth to open, my throat dry, the words barely escaping. Because I followed orders," I rasped, my voice barely a breath. The creature crouched down, its face mere inches from mine. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were pits of endless blackness. "Because you chose," it corrected me. I shook my head, trembling. I had no choice. The thing smiled, revealing rows of jagged, uneven teeth. The excuse of cowards. Pain shot through my chest as if something had reached inside and tore at my very being. I gasped, my vision blurring, my body convulsing. "Every man has a choice," the creature whispered. "And you chose death. You chose war. You chose to kill." I choked on my own breath. "You knew it was wrong. You knew the moment you pulled the trigger. You felt it, the doubt, the hesitation, the whisper in your mind telling you to stop." The voices of those I had killed echoed around me, a chorus of sorrow and judgment. The creature leaned in closer. "And yet, you pulled the trigger anyway." Something inside me shattered. A wail of agony tore from my throat, but no sound escaped. I was drowning, suffocating under the weight of my own choices. The creatures surrounded me now, their forms shifting, their claws reaching. They did not need to touch me. Their words alone ripped me apart. And then, the light appeared. It was faint at first, like a distant flicker in a void of eternal night. But it grew. The creatures hissed and recoiled, their twisted forms retreating as the light pushed through the darkness. It was warm, unlike the fire that had scorched my skin. It did not burn, it healed. I turned toward it, my body instinctively drawn to the source. And within the light, a figure stepped forward. Tall, radiant, strong yet gentle. I did not need to ask who he was. I knew. Jesus. His eyes met mine, and for the first time since falling into this abyss, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. Hope. Before we continue, I want to do something special for you. If you're watching this, comment your name and the city you are from below. In the next video, I want to give you a personal shout out and let you know that you are seen. Don't miss the next part of this powerful story. ***, leave a like and subscribe *** so you don't miss what comes next. The presence of Jesus was unlike anything I had ever felt. The light surrounding him was not just brightness, it was warmth, peace, and something deeper, something that reached into the very core of my soul. In his gaze there was no hatred, no accusation, no wrath. There was only understanding. For a moment the chaos around me faded. The flames, the screams, the creatures that had tormented me, all of it seemed distant, as if their grip on me had loosened in his presence. But the weight in my chest did not disappear. I lowered my head, unable to meet his eyes for long. "I do not deserve to stand before you," I whispered. My voice cracked with the weight of my guilt. "I have done terrible things." Jesus remained silent, his expression unchanged. He did not need to speak for me to know that he saw everything, every moment of my life, every choice, every hesitation, every regret. Tears burned down my face. "I followed orders," I muttered. I told myself I had no choice, that it was not my fault. The words felt empty even as I said them. Jesus took a step closer. The light around him seemed to pulse, reaching out toward me, filling the space between us. "But you knew," he said softly. His voice was unlike anything I had ever heard, not condemning, not accusing. It was truth, spoken with the weight of eternity. "You knew and still you chose." I gasped as if I had been struck. Every memory of hesitation, every moment when my heart had screamed at me to stop, every face that had flashed in my mind as I pulled the trigger, it all came rushing back, raw and undeniable. I fell to my knees. "I am lost," I whispered. Jesus knelt before me. "You are only lost if you choose to stay in the darkness." I looked up, my vision blurred with tears. "But I have done too much. How could I ever be forgiven?" There was a pause, a moment of deep silence where his words settled into the broken pieces of my soul. "Forgiveness is not about what you have done," he said. "It is about what you choose to do now." The weight of his words pressed against my heart. I had spent my life believing that the past defined a man, that his actions determined his worth. But here, in the presence of Jesus, that belief crumbled. He was offering something I had never understood before. A second chance. I swallowed, my voice barely above a whisper. "What must I do?" Jesus stood, extending a hand toward me. The moment I reached for it, warmth flooded through me, shattering the chains that bound me. The flames around us dimmed, and the ground beneath me no longer felt suffocating. "You must choose peace," he said. "Not once, not twice, but every day for the rest of your life." The words echoed through me, shaking the very foundation of who I had been. And then, everything shifted. The darkness around us cracked, like glass breaking apart. A force, unseen but powerful, began to pull me away from the abyss. The figures that had tormented me faded, their whispers swallowed by the light. And then, I woke up. The harsh glare of the sun hit my eyes, the sounds of war still echoing around me, but distant, as if they no longer belonged to me. My body ached, my shoulder burning with pain from the bullet wound. I was lying on a stretcher, carried by fellow soldiers, their voices urgent but blurred. For a moment I could not tell if I was truly back, if it had all been real. But I knew. I had been to hell. I had seen the weight of my sins. And I had been given a second chance. I lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, my body weak but my mind overwhelmed with thoughts I couldn't escape. The weight of what I had seen, what I had lived, pressed on me heavier than any injury. Hell was real. I had been there. But so was heaven. And Jesus. The images were seared into my mind, the agony of those trapped in torment, the overwhelming guilt that had crushed me, and then the light, his light. His words echoed in my soul, refusing to be forgotten. Asterisk, you must choose peace. Not once, not twice, but every day for the rest of your life. Asterisk. For so long, I had thought that following orders absolved me of responsibility. That duty meant obedience, that survival meant doing what had to be done. But I had seen the truth with my own eyes. It was never just about orders. It was about choices. And now, for the first time, I had been given one. Days passed, but I barely spoke. My fellow soldiers came to check on me, some with concern, others with admiration for my survival. They joked about my return, about how lucky I was. But I wasn't lucky. I had been spared. And I could no longer ignore why. One night, a chaplain came to visit. He sat by my bed, his voice gentle. You've been through something, haven't you? I hesitated before nodding. His gaze was kind, but it held an understanding that made me uneasy. Soldiers don't often talk about these things, but I've heard the stories. Near-death experiences, visions, encounters. I swallowed hard. He leaned forward. Do you want to tell me what you saw? I opened my mouth, then closed it. How could I put it into words? How could I explain that I had seen the full weight of my sins, that I had fallen into the abyss and had been pulled out only by the grace of God. For a long moment I said nothing. Then in a quiet voice I asked, "Do you believe in hell?" The chaplain didn't flinch. "Yes." I met his gaze. I was there. A long silence stretched between us. I expected disbelief, maybe even dismissal. But instead he only nodded. "Tell me," he said. And so I did. I told him everything. The fire, the suffering, the weight of my sins, the faces of those I had wronged, the whispers that had torn me apart. I told him about the creatures, the voices that mocked me, the judgment I had felt in every fiber of my being. And then Jesus, the way he had looked at me, the way he had lifted me from that abyss and spoken words that changed everything. When I finished, the chaplain sat in deep thought, his hands folded. "It wasn't just a vision," he finally said. "It was a warning. And a gift." I felt a lump in my throat. "A gift?" He nodded. "Most men don't get a second chance. But you do." I already knew that. I had felt it from the moment I woke up on that stretcher. But what I didn't know was what to do with it. "How do I change?" I asked, my voice almost breaking. The chaplain's answer was simple. "You already have." I let his words sink in, but the road ahead felt impossible. How could I atone for everything I had done? How could I undo the pain I had caused? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I had to try. The next morning, I requested to be discharged early. My body was still weak, but I didn't care. I had made my decision. I would not return to my old life. I turned in my uniform. I walked away from the barracks. I cut ties with the men I had fought beside, the life I had once sworn to. I no longer belonged there. Instead, I set out on a new path. A path of peace. It would not be easy. There would be doubt, resistance, even ridicule. But I had seen hell with my own eyes, and I had heard the words of Jesus. And now I had to live by them. This was not just about me. It was about the people still trapped in darkness, the ones who didn't yet realize the truth. I had been given a second chance, and I would spend the rest of my life making it count. If this story has touched you, I want to invite you to be part of something greater. Like this video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing these powerful messages. We don't make anything from this. We do it because we believe in it. And your support, your likes, your comments, they help us reach more people who need to hear this. Join this community. Be part of the light. The past could not be erased, but I could no longer be defined by it. The weight of my sins remained, but it no longer crushed me, it guided me. I had seen the truth, faced my judgment, and had been pulled from the depths by grace. Now I had to live differently. I left behind everything I once knew. The uniform, the orders, the war. I stepped into a world that felt unfamiliar, yet more real than anything I had ever known. I sought peace not as a vague idea but as a way of life. It was difficult. The ghosts of my past followed me, their voices whispering in the dark. Regret lingered, but it no longer held me captive. Each day I reminded myself of what Jesus had said. You must choose peace. Every day. So I did. I found ways to help others, to heal instead of harm, to listen instead of command. I spoke of my experience to those willing to hear, hoping that my warning might save them from the same mistakes. Not everyone understood. Some mocked me. Some called me a traitor, a coward. But I had seen hell. I had heard the screams. I had carried the weight of judgment. Their words could not shake me, because I had also seen Jesus. And in his light, I had been reborn. This is not just a story, it's a message. If you've made it this far, it means you were meant to hear it. Click on the next video that is appearing on your screen. What you'll see there may change your life forever.